Sarah, I first got to meet you through Get Organized HQ, and so many women emailed me and said, Dawn, you have to check out Sarah and her Small Changes channel because she gets it. She understands those who have chronic illness and energy limitations. And whether that is from physical illness or if it's depression or other mental things that we deal with, anxiety, they just totally destroy our motivation, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Minimal Mom Podcast. Sarah McDONALD is a YouTuber who's all about simple living. She came from a family of hoarders, but she broke free and is now on a mission to help others do the same. So if you're ready to simplify, declutter, and live your best life, come join her on this fun and meaningful journey.
And I think anytime something is unpredictable, if you don't know how your mental space is going to be tomorrow, or even if you have sick children or a sick partner or a sick parent that you take care of, all of those things mean that you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. And so how do you plan for stuff you don't know is going to happen?
Right. So Sarah, tell us why are you passionate about this topic? What did you go through in your own life?
So, I've had a very, very long health journey. When I was 21 years old, I had my gallbladder out, which is something that happens every day, and it should have just been really, straightforward. But very quickly after that, they realized that there was something really badly wrong. And so I had about 20 operations over the course of the next few months. And then over that time, I realized that it wasn't going to get any better and that this was something I was going to need to have to deal with. And by all accounts, I probably shouldn't have had it. I didn't, young people shouldn't get it. You should be over 40. They didn't really know what to do with me. And I know that a lot of people are in this situation where not only are you battling with a chronic illness, but you're not getting any answers, or they're finding answers, but they don't really know how to help you. And whether that's same again, physical or mental and all of those things. And so as a young wife and a young mom, I was like, how am I going to make this work? And so I had to sort of adapt on the fly. And then, even now, my baby is 7, but we've got 5 children. Even now I'm having to sort of work through, okay, how's this all going to work in the next stage of life, still knowing that here we are. I'm going to be 37, guys. Full disclosure, it's been a long time. And so it's that constant need to try and keep stuff organized, even when you're unwell. And, and when you're unwell, sometimes all that mental stuff comes as well. If you're feeling really sick, if you're in pain, all of that happens.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, so we're going to go through some of your top tips for surviving and thriving with chronic illness. Let's talk about planning for sickness and how can I make my home and my routines conducive with inviting others in to help.
I'm sure that some of you guys out there are already sick and you're like, it's a bit late for that, guys. I'm already sick. I'm already here in the thick of it. And I think that this is something that happens to a lot of people when they themselves have, this is where I think mental decluttering comes in. They themselves are a minimalist and they're like, I don't care about any of this stuff. I want it all to go away. But physically, I can't take it out. And so this is where planning ahead and getting others to help you and building a community around you comes in. And so what I would encourage you to do, something really simple, is on the day that you feel less bad, because most illnesses sort of come in waves. On the days you feel less bad, it's really tempting to do a whole house clean. I say to my kids, we're going to go through this house like a hot curry and it's going to be so clean by the end of the day. And that is wonderful. But I would, instead of doing that, take your mental capacity on that day, which is going to be a lot better than when you're in terrible pain or having, a flare of any kind, and saying, okay, what are the things that we do every week, and write that down. What are the meals that we like? What are the things that we always keep in our pantry? I actually have a click and collect order, like an Instacart order, whatever you use, saved on my phone, that if something bad happens, that I know that stuff that I normally buy every week that would make most of the meals that we like is already there for somebody else. And that can kind of just kick off a way for other people to help you, because sometimes people don't know the right thing to do. And it's really hard to ask for help, particularly if you're a doer. Like, Dawn, I think we're doers. And having to say to someone else, I can't do it, is really difficult. And so knowing what those things are going to be most helpful to you, and write them down now, because when you're in the middle of that pain, or if you're feeling really unlike yourself, those are the times where having it all written down, and it's like a gift from your past self saying, hey, it would actually be most helpful for me if you would take my kids out and let them run for a while, because I physically can't do that.
Yeah.
And I can actually potter around here at home. So
Sure.
it might even look different to what the people around you think is helpful. And that's okay too, as long as you can communicate that to them.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I know my sister, when she had their second baby, she had wanted, like when my mom would come or someone would come to help she wanted them to help with the laundry, but she worried that stains wouldn't get pre-treated and then they would go through it, and so she wrote out instructions for the laundry, and then she put on there, here's the pre-treat, please pre-treat any, stains or whatever. And so that gave her some peace of mind that, like, okay, somebody could, step in. They know where things go, how it goes, and all of that. And so I'm like, well, that was so good, because otherwise we get kind of protective and we're like, well, there's only these things that I can do because I'm the only one that knows how to do it right.
Exactly. And there's like real reasons for that. Like, you're not just like a control freak. If you have a kid that, is really sensitive to fragrance or something like that, and you're like, oh, I just, I have a real reason for why I need it done this way. Most people, they really do want to help you and they want to do it your way. And this is, again, where if you've simplified these processes, if your kitchen is really easy to put stuff away, chances are either they will put it in the right spot, or if it's in the wrong spot, it's not that far. It's not lost in a Tupperware cupboard that's, so full that you're never going to find the lid again. It's one cupboard over and you found it and you were so grateful that someone put your dishes away. And so all of those things, again, it comes back to, it all overflows one into the other, and it's totally fine to ask for help, and it's totally fine to ask for help where you need it, in the way that you need it, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. And like, I love acts of service is like my love language.
Okay.
Probably why I chose the vocation that I did. And so even like when, a lot of the people that I work with, like in real life here in Australia, are elderly people who are sort of needing support workers to come in, and their home's not safe. So we make their home safe for support workers to come in, but we still want it to feel like their home. We still want to respect their things. And so those people you invite in, they will want to do that for you too. And if they don't, if they are not someone who would be happy to follow your laundry routine, that's probably not the right person to ask to help with those specific items. They are the person that you might say, hi, I've got a pile of stuff that I've decluttered. Would you mind dropping it off? Where like you can take it to whichever op shop, thrift store that you like.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I know my mom, when she was sick and when she did have a kidney transplant, which was so great, but she had one friend who was surprisingly really not empathetic. And so she was just like, she's not the one I'm going to invite over to sit with me and help me right now. And I think it's a little disappointing sometimes, but hopefully there are others in your life that you can count on, and maybe some people you haven't even thought of who would love to feel needed and useful. And I mean, often people will say to me like, oh, Dawn, I know you're so busy, but if anyone in my life was like, I just really need this, like, or could you come over for an hour today and help me with this? I would drop everything and go do it, And so I think there are probably more people in your life that love you and care about you and want to support you. They just don't know how. And so if you will be brave enough to make a list, to write out instructions, to start to integrate them, I think it's not only a gift to you and it'll help you, but I really think it's a gift to the other person too.
Absolutely. And if you know someone in your world that is walking through something like this, just like you would reach out to a new mom who's just had a baby, because you know what that looks like. And for a lot of people, you know, I can put some blush on a really bad day and put on a smile and be okay. But some days I'm actually in a lot of pain, and we don't want to feel like this huge burden on society. We don't want to be whinging all the time. So sometimes I'm friends with people for quite a long period of time, particularly if they don't find my channel, and then it comes up in conversation that, oh, I'm going into hospital next week. And so then they're like, what? You're not well? And so I do totally get that. It's really hard to sort of know who the right people to let into that is. And I think just acknowledging that is so healing for people, Dawn, just to hear that your mum walked through some friends that weren't as supportive, and that it's not that you've done anything wrong or that you're not worthy of that help, because you are. It's just that that person, for whatever reason, maybe they've got a lot of stuff going on in their life, or acts of service is not their love language, so they don't even not have the capacity for it. And, you know, sometimes that person might be the person closest to you. So that might be your husband or your wife or your mom, which is really tough. And I'm sorry for anyone if that's your situation. But again, finding the things that they are sort of willing to do or happy to do is sort of like the best possible course, or the things that aren't going to be hurtful for you if they don't do it your way.
Yeah. So Sarah, if we are, as we're listening, if we're thinking of people in our life that we know suffer from chronic illness, what do you have any ideas for ways that we can reach out to them and offer help? Like, are there certain things we should offer, or is there a certain way we should ask them if we can help them?
There's so many things that you can do, and your own personality is going to have something to do with it. But just in general, some things that I find helpful are, whenever someone finds out that I make videos on YouTube, they're like, oh, you wouldn't want to come to my house. And I don't know if that happens to you too, Dawn. And like, that actually hurts my heart to think that I'm like, I came to see you. I don't care. Like, my kitchen gets messy too. That's totally fine. And so making sure that when we're talking around friendships, that you make it really clear that you're not there to be judgmental, that you understand that that's not a priority for you to make sure that everybody else's houses are clean or that everybody else is a minimalist. You're just here helping to provide the tools. And so for you guys out there that probably don't put your house on YouTube,
Yeah.
the same thing can be true though. If they know that you're a really clean person and, you know, they were like, oh, I've been so sick, just reassuring them it's totally fine. I would still love to come and have a cup of tea. Would you prefer to come to my house so that you can get a change of scenery? I don't care if we just sit on the couch. All of those things are helpful. And then there are other ways that you can just, when you're there, if you see a need, you can say, oh, I just heard that your washing machine plays a beautiful song when it's finished. Can I hang that out for you? Oh, we in Australia, we have like 90% sunshine. So if you guys don't hang your clothes outside, can I switch that to the dryer for you? And those sorts of things that seem really organic are way easier to accept as help than sort of you saying, can I come around and clean your whole house? Because someone's going to be like, oh, no, I don't want you to do that. But if you're there and you hear that, that's another way. If someone is sort of really not coping with asking for help, sometimes even offering, particularly for someone you're really close to, like a daughter or your sister, can I pay for a cleaner to come? Like, they are professionals. And I think sometimes we can accept that kind of help a little bit easier. And there's absolutely no shame. There's no shame in needing a cleaner for a season if that's what you need, or forever. Cleaners are great.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And I have to imagine, Sarah, that it gets really lonely when you are dealing with chronic illness and you're home a lot. Would you encourage us, maybe if we've reached out to someone and they're like, oh, I'm not up for visitors, or I don't want, but I have to imagine they do. Like, how persistent should we be with our close friends and family if we know that they're going through something difficult right now?
I think that recognizing that mental load is part of the problem. So having to think about things can be really difficult, particularly if it's a mental health struggle that someone's walking through, if they're feeling depressed or walking through a really hard season, even if it's grief of losing someone and they're just not coping, is sort of thinking outside the box with how you can present things. So rather than, can we make a time to come over? That's a lot of thoughts for them. So something like, hey, I'm going to be near your house on this afternoon. Would it be okay if I popped in? I totally don't mind if things are a mess. Or I'm driving by. Would you like to pick up a coffee? We can go through the drive-through and just sit in my car. Those things that are, you are taking all of the mental load away. You are doing all of the thinking for them. And then they can just say, yeah, that sounds great, instead of making it like, okay, well, I've got a doctor's appointment on Tuesday. So things that are sort of nearer in time are sometimes often like a little bit easier for them to say yes or no to. Another thing might be, when it comes to like not wanting to be pushy or like, insist that they see you, is just, hey, do you want to do a FaceTime? Do you want to have a chat? I'm a huge advocate, because I have an ADHD brain, of body doubling, that just having someone, I like talk to my sister while she washes her dishes, and that makes her happy. And so something like that, where maybe they don't have to show you all of the mess and their, uncleaned toilet or whatever,
Yeah.
but they can be with you like we are now, is really helpful. Or they can put some headphones on and they can chat to you while they walk around or do physical therapy, all of those things. And so if you can think outside the box a little bit, it also says to that person that, like, you are valuable enough for me to go out of my way to think of a way for us to connect, just like we would with our kids, just like we would with a new friend, that this might be a totally new season for them, and that's okay. Just like a friend who's just had a baby, they can't drop everything at a moment's notice. It's a similar sort of thought pattern if someone is walking through that season.
Yeah. No, that's so good. Well, as we wrap up, I know a lot of women who struggle in this area. I've often heard them say, especially if it's, physical limitations, that they say, my brain wants to do something, but my body doesn't. And I'm feeling so discouraged. What encouragement would you have for them today?
I would just say I am right there. This is probably for me the hardest part of having chronic illness. Like I have a pretty high pain threshold. I can cope with most of it. However, the being a doer and not being able to is super frustrating. And it's totally okay to feel that way. It's totally okay to leave a message, leave a comment on this or wherever you're listening or watching. Let us know that that's how you're feeling, because just feeling heard in that and saying it out loud gives, it almost takes away its power over you. And also just recognizing the things that you have done. So doing a reverse to-do list. So instead of like being like, I have done nothing today, which I guarantee you is not true. It's like people who say they have no routine. I'm like, I bet you do, because we're creatures of habit. And so if you can write down, I got my kids to school today. I packed 3 lunches. I gave my kids a cuddle. We read a book together on the lounge. All of those things are things you have done today, and you should really celebrate all of it, because it all matters. It's all valuable. You called the doctor and made a doctor's appointment. Like that deserves a treat, Dawn.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I love that so much. Okay, so let's talk then that simple doesn't mean bad.
Yes. Okay. This is like my things to live by, that I think, especially since the Instagram, Pinterest version of our life has become the norm, that it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I need that. Or I just saw a restocking reel and they filled their fridge and it was all color coordinated, and that's lovely. And if you have the capacity for that, absolutely do it. But the reality is that, having really simple meals on hand, buying the same kind of groceries every week that you know that everyone in your house is going to eat it, that's perfect. And just like minimalism flows out, so does this, it's basically minimalizing your whole life, in that if your kids are doing 7 different activities, that might not be something that you can continue to do either physically or mentally. And, kids have been living a long, long, long time without soccer and singing and all these other things. And like, I totally get that, I'm a homeschool mom, so, I'm down for all the activities, but I also recognize that there are seasons where I need to say, okay, we can all pick one and that's got to be it. And it can't be on a weekend because I need that time to be able to reset. And so these are the boundaries that I am going to set for our family. And again, it flows on so many areas. You don't need to do a birthday party every single birthday. You don't need to make Christmas this massive extravaganza if that's not something that's going to bring you joy, or that's something you can do this year.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I remember visiting with Dr. John Deloney before Christmas. And I mean, specifically, we were talking about like, well, what if we just don't have the money to buy all the things that our kids as friends are getting? And he said something that I thought was so good. He said, your kids are picking up on your stress around it, whether you think they are or not. And I think that applies in this situation too. When we were growing up, my mom, she has a degenerative kidney disease. And so she was on dialysis when we were in high school. And so we helped out a lot growing up. And like my mom will listen. She's the best ever. Like no hard feelings. But we could tell the things that were hard for her. And of course, we would not have wanted her to go over the top with birthday parties and like we didn't need to have friends over because that meant having to clean the house so we could have friends over. And that was okay with us. I know she worried so much about, is it taking away from our childhood or whatnot? But it was okay. We understood. We knew why. And I would not have wanted to see my mom put herself out to give us those things. I would have felt bad about that. I did not want that. And so our kids are often much more reasonable maybe than we give them credit for.
And I think just touching on the money side, like what you talked about with Dr. John, is it becomes a much bigger thing for a lot of people, because if you were a 2-income home and one of you can't work at all now, or if this has come out unexpectedly, like you've just been diagnosed with lupus or kidney disease. My sister has lupus, and I'm just walking through this with her now. As you can see, autoimmune disease is obviously high genetic load for that. And so thinking about simplifying your life also runs into those aspects of money, which is a huge part of almost everyone I talk to, is like, well, that would be great to get rid of all of my stuff, but, we're really struggling financially and all of those things. And so thinking about how you can simplify things, not only does it simplify your life, it also, can lower expenses. It can help you manage the uncertainty of your financial situation while you're walking through it.
Yeah. And I think we don't give enough credit to, often I totally understand how we keep things because we're like, well, maybe when I feel better, then I will want to do this hobby, or maybe, but there are so many things that, if we'll go through our closet, if we'll simplify our wardrobe so it makes getting dressed so much easier, probably no matter what, you're not going to need all those clothes again in the future, or all those books, we have way more. Like, yes, I hope we all feel better in the future and we can do the things, but we still have way more inventory than we would ever actually use when we are feeling good. And I think something happened when I turned 40. I became much more aware of how much time we actually have in a day. And I just got really realistic about all of my crafts and hobbies and different things I had. And even in the perfect world scenarios, I still didn't have enough hours in a week to do all the things for all the stuff I had acquired. And so really being realistic of, it's not even necessarily because of the current illness or mental health challenges you might be facing. It's literally just that we are all very limited by hours in the day. And so letting go of some of this stuff, I couldn't believe how much guilt it took away. I didn't realize I would look at that stuff and feel guilty that I wasn't finishing it, feel guilty about all the money I had spent on it. So when I could donate that stuff to an adult day center, and know people were using it, it wasn't wasting away in storage, that actually felt so much better to me than trying to continue to organize and keep it all.
And I think that this is something that is also probably even more so prominent in the pain and illness community, whether it's mental or physical, is that sometimes we have to grieve that person that we were. So there can be massive changes. If you were a super active person before you had chronic back pain, you might have been skiing or surfing or whatever that looked like for you. And so having to grieve that person probably isn't coming back, or if they are, it's going to be a long time from now. And accepting that and finding new things that bring you joy is part of that journey. But I think when you, like you said, Dor, when you let it go, it actually is the best release of guilt and shame. And it helps that process of accepting, hey, my life's going to look different now. That doesn't mean it's going to be terrible. You are going to find there is all sorts of inclusive hobbies that I love that, all these communities, like particularly like the crafting community, is so accepting of, hey, this is something you can do when you're not feeling well. And so there's a whole life out there for you. It just might not be surfing, and that's sad, and you should grieve that, but you can actually just let those things go and do something different. And particularly with clothes, there are all sorts of reasons. Anybody who's, taking steroids or can't move the way that they used to, that might mean grieving, a smaller version of yourself, or the opposite. Like with me, my body rejects almost all food. And so it's like I have to grieve this person who was like a bit curvier. And so that's okay. And I'm going to keep the clothes that look great on me now. And should that change in the future, I'll buy some clothes that do suit my new figure. And that's totally fine too.
Yeah. That's so good. Okay. I love this next tip. Weird, but it works.
This is like my tagline. Weird, but it works. It's so easy. Again, the Pinterest and Instagram world that we live in, it's so easy to be like, oh, but this is supposed to live here, and I'm supposed to have this many, and you're supposed to have a fully stocked bathroom that looks this certain way. And that's great if, again, that's what works for you. But if it's not working, you need to let go of that, and you need to do what works. And so if having hair ties and a brush in your kitchen, because that's where you are in the morning and that's where your kids are going to come to you, keep it there. It really doesn't matter that that's not a junk drawer anymore and it's a hair tie drawer. People get grossed out because you have a hairbrush in the kitchen. I don't really see that big a problem. I lose so much hair everywhere I go. It really doesn't matter. But having those things where you need. So my sister, who is walking through a really hard health journey at the moment, we went through and made sure she had everything she needed really close to beside her bed. So she has like a whole medicine cabinet full of stuff right beside her. Is that aesthetically pleasing? Not really. We tried to make it look cute, but at the end of the day, cute is not as important as her being able to reach out and find exactly what she needs right there. And so letting go of other people don't do it this way, that's okay. Other people don't have chronic illness. Other people aren't trying to function through your life. You are. And so do what's going to work for you. And, you might find that actually other people think it's amazing, that that's such a great idea. I can't believe I didn't think of that. So it's probably way less weird than you think anyway.
Yeah, that's so good. So I love what you say, that not all jobs and chores are equal.
Yes. And this is a really big one, especially because lots of advice that you get is sort of aimed at people who are fully functioning all the time and their days are looking pretty similar. And so that's really good advice for them, but it might not be for you. So for example, things like making your bed, that's great advice. And some days, if you're feeling up to it, that is a great motivator. But one of the things I like to remind people is that the jobs that are the most important to you are the ones that are going to get significantly worse if you don't do it.
Okay.
So in my case, that's stuff like dishes and laundry, as in, if I don't make my bed or I don't wash my floors, it's going to take me about the same amount of time to clean my floors 3 days from now or do it today. Whereas the dishes in our kitchen will be a whole lot worse if it gets out of hand, and my kids need clothes and we need clothes. And so those sorts of things, if they get out of hand, and particularly, those are the things that make you feel worse if they're not right. So if you don't have clean clothes, or if there's clothes everywhere, you don't know what's clean and what's dirty, those are all things that make you feel like you don't know what's going on, that your kids can't move through their routines, or your partners or other people who live in your home, even yourself. If you can't, if you are able to work and you need to get to work, what are those things that are actually imperative to that stuff happening? And as great as it is to make your bed, and that can be a great motivator, that might be something you let slide for a little while you're walking through this, and focus on what are those things that you really need to get out the door, or to make you feel like the home can still function, even if it doesn't look perfect. There's crumbs on the floor. That's okay. We can vacuum them tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I think that's so great. And were there ways then, because for many, even doing the dishes is like for many, like that's my worst chore. Like I like, if I would actually rather probably do anything, but you're so right. Like when the dishes get behind, they're harder to wash. There's something about stacked up dirty dishes that feels really yuck. So if we're already trying to get out of a funk and then we're like, and now there's like all this, it really weighs on us. So did you find any ways, have you found to like trick yourself to get started or to get motivated on the days when you just really don't have anything to give?
So I think proximity is a big thing, especially if you are having any sort of physical illness or pain. So, I talk with a lot of people who get migraines and back pain. They come up really often in people who reach out to me. And so literally the difference between actually getting something done and not doing it all might be that there is a container of cleaning wipes right there, so that when you're brushing your teeth, you can wipe down the sink. Or, you are going to get up and make a cup of coffee. And so that 2 minutes while the kettle boils, do you guys use kettles?
Like Keurig, while you put it in and let
yes, your Keurig goes. And so while that 2 minutes of that is happening, what can I do while I'm standing in this place? Can I put a stool in my kitchen to make it more accessible for me? That it might look a little bit different, but definitely proximity is really key. That having all of those things, I call them roadblocks, as in if you have to go downstairs to find something to clean it, that's going to be a roadblock for you physically and mentally. And particularly if you're suffering from like depression or bipolar, a roadblock it can be a stop sign. And so having those things really close and really easy for you. So using a dish soap that you really love that smells really nice, that can be a little thing that's no longer a roadblock for you that you can do. But like you said, Dawn, about, if dishes are really one of the things that you hate the most, I would actually just write that down, because when you're then working out, I know we're going to touch more on this later, but when you're working out, that's something to consider. That, like, you know what? I love being able to sit in my bed and fold laundry. That's really easy for me. But dishes and having to stand, that sucks.
Yeah. And if you found, I got to bring minimalism into this now, because this is where because I haven't suffered from chronic illness. In our household, with no chronic illness, we really suck at doing the dishes, right? And so for us, I'm like, okay, we're going to significantly limit the number of dishes we have, because I know even if you dirty every dish in our kitchen and it's stacked up next to the sink, it's not very much. Like we can run the dishwasher like one time and pretty much everything fits in there except a couple pots and pans. So is that effective with people with these limitations? Or is that making your life harder because there are days where I need extra dishes so that I can get through?
I think a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference. And I do talk a lot about like doing what's right for you, you and I, we're not the minimalist police. We just want you to have the best amount of stuff in your home that's going to work for you. I do sort of lean more to having minimalist sort of amount that you keep in your kitchen all the time, but maybe it looks like having 100 paper plates that you don't use all the time, but this is just a season and it's okay. That if for this couple of weeks while you're having a bad flare, while you're feeling really out of sorts, all of those things, that you've got a backup plan. That means, hey, all of the dishes, I'm not going to be able to cope with that, but we can use paper plates for a couple of days while we get through this. And so finding that balance, there are very few times where I feel like having an enormous amount of non-consumable things is super helpful. Again, things like having extra medicine, extra cleaning products, those personal products you use all the time, you might have some more of those than what you would have if going to the store is not a limitation for you. So those are things that you're going to use all the time. Keep heaps of those on hand, because sometimes going to the store or not being able to have the things that you need is going to be a game changer if you don't have it. But if you can keep the baseline really simple, and even if you can change your mindset around how the things that you make in your kitchen, for example, or in your beauty routine, way simpler, that is going to help you as well, because then you need less items, less amount of items, as in different kinds, that you keep in your bathroom, or you, instead of, in your dishwasher, if you can use a one pot meal or cook everything in your Instapot, that's one pot, and that's going to way decrease the amount that you have. And that's something that maybe people don't think about when they think about minimalism, but I really think that's the magic of it, that it runs into everything else that you do. That if you minimize the stuff in your kitchen, you can also minimize how complicated the meals are.
Yeah, that's so good. And that actually really leads into your next tip, I think, is that convenience sometimes is survival. So giving ourselves permission to use convenience things when we need to.
And, I love zero waste. I love all of those things. And sometimes we just have to accept that right now in this season, for however long it is, I'm not going to be able to do that. There might be some things you can do, like, for example, if cleaning wipes are a real no for you, maybe like putting some cloths right there in your bathroom with 2 spray bottles. So it means that you've got several spray bottles, but you're not using wipes, whatever it looks like. But I just want to give everyone the permission that there is the best way to do things. There is the best practice. Before I was a mum, I worked in human resources. We would talk all the time about best practice, but best practice is not what we do every single day. It's like the gold standard. And maybe later when you are feeling better, you might go back to that, but do what you need to do right now. If it means you need cleaning products in every bathroom, then that's okay for this season.
Well, Sarah, this is so encouraging. And we were visiting beforehand too that truly a simplified house is such a gift that you can give to yourself. And so I know it's so hard. There's so many unknowns with what you're going through, and you don't want to make mistakes when you're decluttering. And, like you said, Sarah, like often finances are tight then too. And I'm not going to be careless and just get rid of these perfectly good things. But our brains get such a break and relief when our house is simplified. And I know even that, saying that, it's not that simple. Like you might have to bring in outside people to help you. So I'm not trying to add to your mental to-do list, but I hope to encourage you to keep going as you're able, to keep working to simplify, because you're worthy of it. And it just makes everything a little bit easier, I think.
Absolutely. And it'll last, even if you get healed or everything gets better and it's totally gone at some point, you'll be so grateful that things are just easier in general. So regardless of whether it's a lifelong thing or just a season, simplifying, I promise you, it will make it better.
Yeah, that's so good. Awesome, Sarah. Well, we will link to your YouTube channel and your other resources down below. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us on the Minimal Mom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who might find value in embracing a simplified lifestyle.